Thank you. And thank you for the invitation to present here at the Pareto conference. It has been a few years since we were here last time, and after having been through a successful restructuring that was completed fourth quarter last year, we now look forward to present Solstad Offshore again, and who we are and what we do and what we believe in. First of all, this is Solstad at a glance. We are a world-leading owner and operator of high-end offshore vessels and across all segments, meaning subsea vessels that we utilize both in the offshore wind market and in the subsea market, being anchor handling vessels and PSVs. And we are also set up in all the main markets globally. We have a full setup in Brazil, in Australia, in Norway, and in the UK, meaning that we can deliver local content solutions to those various local markets, which is definitely a competitive advantage. We are also one of the few companies in our segment that has been through the refinancing, as I mentioned, and still with the strong industrial ownership, being Aker, Hemen, and Solstad family are still the leading industry owners of the company. And historically, we in Solstad we have been an active consolidator in the industry, and there's a lot of talk about it now and about consolidation, but we are actually one of the very few who have actually done it. And I'll come back a little bit to that in a minute. Looking at the industry in total, there are still a way to go until this industry can be classified as healthy. The rates has to come up to sustainable levels. It has started, but there is still a way to go. And the activity is picking up, but we are still a very fragmented industry, and there are different ownership agendas. We see between the various segments we operate that the CSV segment are closer to balance to a supply-demand balance than, for example, the PSV and anchor handling market. And the reason for that is mainly because the CSVs are in demand both from offshore wind and from subsea. In our opinion, further consolidation is needed in this industry. And there are no doubt that the banks are a very important and probably the most important stakeholder in our industry, and we need their participation to take further steps when it comes to consolidation. In Solstad, we have a few clear priorities that we are focusing a lot on. And number one for us is to deliver on the restructuring agreement that we have agreed with our lenders and shareholders. That is about adjusting the fleet. It's about improving the earnings. It's about superior operations, and it's about a controlled cost level. We also would like to grow our presence within offshore wind. We have today about 10% of our revenues comes from offshore wind. But if we look at the part of the fleet which is most relevant for offshore wind, that is the CSV segment. So of the revenue from our CSV fleet, about 30% comes from offshore wind. And we would like to continue that sort of the participation in the offshore wind segment as that market develops. And it looks very interesting, and we are an active player there. I've already mentioned the consolidation, and this is needed, and we have taken the lead. We have merged 3 companies into Solstad. We have taken the lead, and we will continue to do so if the right opportunity arises. And across our fleet and across our activity, we have to take our emissions further down. In Solstad, we have reduced our emissions with about 20% since 2008. We have a target of reducing it to with 50% until 2030, and that is a clear target for us, and we are working on the technology side and other things to achieve that goal. And it's all about what does it take to not only be a company with a good history and a company with a good presence in the market today. It's also about how do we make sure that Solstad Offshore is also relevant for the future markets, and then we need to focus on these four things that I just mentioned. I mentioned or talked about the right sizing of the fleet, and we are actually doing 2 things. We are selling off the part of the fleet that we have classified as non-strategic, and we are activating from layup vessels that are defined as core vessels in our fleet, when and if and when we can justify that based on new contracts. So far this year, we have sold off 14 vessels, and we have activated 8 vessels from layup. So we are targeting a fleet size of about 90 vessels. And for those of you who remember the fleet size after the 4 companies merged back in 2016-17, we had 150 vessels. So we're selling off 60 to recycling, to geographical areas where we have limited access. So we are selling them without meeting them again as competitors in the market. So we have sold over 40 vessels since 2017, and within 6 to 12 months from now, we will be at the targeted level. And then we will have a fleet where about 40% are PSVs, 30% anchor handlers, 30% subsea vessels. And also good to see that of the 80 vessels we have in operation in second quarter, we achieved 88% utilization. And looking back historically, when do we get the rate effect? That is when we see utilization in high 80s, around 90. That's when we can start to see an effect on the rate level, we believe. One of the great benefits we have in Solstad is that we are a true global companies. I mentioned where we have our main operations. We are bidding on contracts on a weekly basis that many of our competitors never see, because we are present in these important markets and other places as well. So we are bidding a lot at the moment, and also especially since early third quarter, we have announced quite a few contracts, and all the contracts we have announced are on better terms than the previous contract. So it's moving in the right direction. That is PSV contracts in West Africa, that is subsea contracts in Brazil, that is subsea projects in India, Malaysia, West Africa. So it's in Norway. So it's across all the geographical regions we operate. The subsea vessels, the CSVs, are benefiting from the growth in both offshore wind and in subsea. And some vessel types are already in shortage. That being, let's say they call it the mid-size CSVs that are in demand both from the wind operators and from subsea. So that looks quite promising, I would say. We also see increased demand for the other type of vessels we have, but there are much more competition, many vessels, but also many bidders, that is keeping pressure on the day rates. But as I mentioned, it's always a very positive sign when we see utilization rates of the numbers I mentioned, and that is normally followed by higher rates. So to summarize a bit and see where we believe the market is heading. We see on the bidding activity we have, that is very active. We see it on the contracts we are signing now, that is better than what we have seen earlier. We see it on the reactivation of vessels, that this is a start of a better market as we see it. And it is both wind and it's oil and gas. And for us, it's, I mean, as long as it's going to be installed offshore, whether it's a windmill or it's a subsea template, or if it's a fish farm offshore, everything going into the ocean needs to be installed, needs vessels, and we are of the leading players in that on the vessel side, and we will benefit from an increased activity going forward. So that was my message. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lars Peder. Is it any questions from the audience? Yes, we have one there.
What probability do you assign to Solstad going through another financial restructuring in 2022?
Okay, I can just repeat the question from those watching online. So what is the probability for Solstad going through another restructuring?
We have a restructuring plan that we signed up last year, where there is there are some assumptions of where the market will head. And for us and for everybody else, it will be all about how the market develops. If the market develops and we are delivering according to our own expectations, we will be able to refinance in a normal way. If it doesn't, that could be different. But as we see it now, we are on the right track to deliver. But it remains to be seen. It's up to the market.
Okay, and I have a question. You mentioned that the rates and utilization is picking up and that the renewable segment is important going forward. But do you see any differences in rates within the renewable segment compared with oil and gas? And do you feel that the renewable segment is getting more crowded with your competitors obviously turning their heads against that segment as well?
I think our experience, at least lately, is that we have achieved higher rates in the oil and gas market than we have in offshore wind. That being said, you might see longer contracts within offshore wind, so it's some pros and some cons. But on let's say on project by project basis, I would say we have seen higher rates in subsea. I think about the segment being crowded. I think what is the biggest difference now compared to earlier downturn we have seen is that, for example, in back 6-8 years when we had a downturn in combination with a large order book. So there came actually more vessels into a bad market. Now there are no vessels under construction, no relevant vessels under construction, and there will not be any new vessels being built for the foreseeable future either. So it's the vessels that are in the market today that needs to do all the work. So, which is positive, of course.
Yes, that's positive and very interesting. Yeah, and thank you very much.